Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host, Chris Taylor, and this is The Devil's Advocate, the show where everything is made up and the points don't matter. That's right, the points are like codex entries in a BioWare game. You don't read them, I don't read them, they don't matter.
Now, let's go on to a game called Whose Line?
Speaking of BioWare, today's topic at hand is Mass Effect. In my opinion, one of the best Star Wars-esque video games to come out in recent memory. Great combat, excellent story, amazing action set pieces, but that ending angered damn near everybody, to the point where the makers changed things after the game was released. And with Mass Effect Andromeda coming out, it's been on my mind quite a bit lately. But here's the thing. The original ending fits perfectly with the games themselves, and today, I'm gonna show you how. So this should go without saying, but spoilers! Although quite frankly, you should all know what my stance on spoilers are by now. Not everyone is me. Also, for this particular piece, I'll be going through all 3 games one by one, from a gameplay perspective. Story elements are obviously gonna come up, but still. So we start with the first one. The original Mass Effect was a huge success on many fronts. Gamers, such as myself, got hooked into the amazing storytelling and combat that was a great mix of RPG strategy and tactical shooter. That being said, much like a child taking his first steps and uttering its first words, there were some missteps. There were big chunks of less action and long exposition. Considering it was the first of a planned trilogy of games, world and character building were a must, but sometimes those story chunks seemed a bit too large. And the controls for driving around in the Mako car, ugh! You could get lost for what felt like hours trying to get that thing to take you where you needed to go. It was, however, just the beginning, and setting up a major new world, discovering planets and life forms. It was critically acclaimed, and in my opinion, one of the true great masterpieces of storytelling. And while the combat may have been a tad slow, more strategy heavy than anything else really, it truly fit with the rest of this RPG classic. I interpret the first Mass Effect as childhood. Everything is fresh and new, the story and characters are just beginning. You're learning about a fascinating world, a galaxy of exciting creatures and humanoids, and taking your first steps into a larger, more expansive world. But if Mass Effect 1 is childhood, Mass Effect 2 is most assuredly the teenage years.
Luckily, the girls never noticed your infantile mustache because they were hypnotized by the fire engine-sized zit on your forehead.
It starts with death.
I have no ass. I'm minus an ass.
The main character ends up dying in the opening parts before getting reborn, in a sense. Just like with high school, where everything you thought you know amounts to nothing really.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
You need to change, grow, and evolve, and that's what this game did as well. Starting with the combat, which cut down on the tactical RPG elements to feel more action-oriented. The fighting was faster, not bogged down with tedious strategy, and the characters, at least on the surface, seemed a lot more one-dimensional and titillating. Take Jack, for instance, running around half-naked and spouting obscenities every other sentence.
They were just like the rest. Didn't give one shit about me.
And while from a storyline perspective it did make sense, that's the funny thing about stories. They are, in fact, a work of fiction. There are always methods of telling similar stories in different ways without the need for blatant sexualization of the characters. Then again, I can't really fault anyone for doing this. This happens to be a thing within gaming to this very day.
You want to touch me? Come on.
Much like a teenager going through high school, you learn fairly quickly to accentuate the positives and hide the negatives. The positives in this case being the dialogue options, the storytelling being more streamlined, and the action parts of the combat. The negatives being the vast portions of emptiness in between story and combat, and the horrid driving sections. Also, like a teenager, this game seemed less focused on the galaxy at large and more on a specific group. The Cerberus organization, with its leader, voiced by Charlie Sheen's dad. Just the perfect mix of sly, I know more than what I'm telling you character, and urgency to get the job at hand done.
You and I have different methods, but I can't argue with your results.
Also, like a teenager, I'm sorry to say, this one seems more focused on the self rather than the whole. Granted, it is the middle entry, so it doesn't have the benefit of being new and doesn't have the closure of, well, being an ending. So it had the daunting task of keeping everything moving, getting to a logical conclusion, and still maintaining interest for the next and what we thought was final installment of the franchise. And since it was focused on the self, what better way to close out the second game than with a suicide mission? That's right, what seems to be insurmountable odds and a mission that, from a storytelling perspective, seems to require absolute perfection to even stand a chance.
With some kind of suicide squad.
The benefit of hindsight is that you can see your own imperfections. In my own high school life, I always felt like I was the only one going through problems and insecurities. That's why I was the lone hero going through an impossible task. That impossible task being high school, of course. And getting to the end did seem like it required absolute perfection. And a healthy dose of luck.
Sir, the possibility of successfully navigating an asteroid field is approximately 3,720 to 1!
Never tell me the odds.
So if Mass Effect 1 is childhood, and Mass Effect 2 is the teenage years, it should be obvious that the third installment is, in fact, the gaming equivalent of adulthood. And boy, does it ever show. Taking past experiences and learning from one's mistakes, we get the last and best installment of the trilogy. The story is much more focused and exciting. We are back to dealing with the galaxy at large rather than a personal story. Things that happened in the previous two games, if you've been porting over your save all along, are referenced and expanded upon within this one. The combat has been perfected. The story itself is yet another masterpiece, and it all culminates to 3 different shades of light and the main character dying for real this time. What? Gamers the world over were enraged. How dare BioWare take 3 games just to kill off our guy? After years of falling in love with these characters and this story, and making decisions all along the way, shouldn't there have been more than just 3 different endings? Shouldn't our choices have mattered? That was the main talking point after people finished up. Our choices didn't actually matter, and nothing really changed. And that was exactly the point of the games. Childhood, teenage years, adulthood. Take a moment. Okay, no, I'm too excited for this part. If you take a look at your own life, all the things you do, the job you have, the decisions you make, no matter how perfect or imperfect it is, it all ends the same way no matter what. It's not that your choices don't matter or that you don't affect the world around you in some way. It's that no matter what you do, no matter what you manage to accomplish or the relationships you make along the way, no matter what, the ending is always the same. Death.
Actually, kid, I just kind of fell into this gig. You know, I really wanted to be a wood nymph.
Death is merely an ending. How you die and how it'll affect those around you, it is still exactly that. And in my opinion, that's what the Mass Effect trilogy was all about. That no matter what you do, how you interact with those around you and in the galaxy at large, and how hard you try, the ending, the grand finale, will always be the same. Despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, I do hope I managed to shed some light as to why the original ending to Mass Effect makes the most sense. As each game takes on its own place as an interpretation of life itself, it is clear, to me anyways, that the ending as it originally was is the only natural conclusion. In some ways, in a lot of ways really, I find video games to be like art. It's brutal, sometimes breathtaking, and completely subjective. We all view things on our own ways, based on our own experiences and thought processes. And it's also open to interpretation, to other people's opinions, and with that breeds disagreements. In light of that, feel free to let us know in the comments below what you think of Mass Effect as a whole. Did you see things differently than I did? By all means, defend the new, more elaborate ending as well, so that I may proceed to prove you wrong.
Boom! Lawyered.
But for now, as it pertains to the original ending to Mass Effect, the defense rests.
I'm Commander Shepard, and this is my favorite store on the Citadel.
Oh my! Excellent.
Splendid.